At the most elite high school in South Korea, the institution where the nation's top 1% gather, Han Ji-woo struggles to find his place. He was once the brightest student at his modest previous school, but here, surrounded by prodigies, he finds himself perilously close to the bottom of his class, particularly in math, which is regarded as the crucial subject for entry into a top college. His peers come from wealthy families and can afford private tutors and intensive boot camps, whereas Ji-woo relies on student welfare and cannot afford such luxuries. His math teacher, Mr. Kim Dong-hwi, warns him that his current grades will be insufficient for admission into a prestigious university and suggests he might want to consider transferring to another school. One evening, Ji-woo's roommates pull together some money and send him out to buy snacks and alcohol for the group. On his way back, however, he is apprehended by the night guard Lee Hak-sung. The following morning, Mr. Kim tries to coerce Ji-woo into revealing the identities of the other students involved in the scheme, but Ji-woo, valuing loyalty above all, refuses to betray them. This earns him the notice of classmate Park Bo-ram, though it also leads to his temporary expulsion from the dormitories. Later, his roommates attempt to reward him for his loyalty, but Ji-woo refuses the money, emphasizing that friendship is more important than payment. They begin discussing alternative ways to sneak in late-night snacks, but with Hak-sung patrolling diligently, it has become nearly impossible. The students jokingly nickname him the Kami officer because of his background as a North Korean defector. Meanwhile, Hak-sung visits his doctor, who warns him that working night shifts is detrimental to his health and that dependence on sleeping pills has disrupted his natural biorhythm. Hak-sung responds that this is the only position he can secure as a defector, and unless a better opportunity is arranged, he will continue taking the medication. Later, he returns to his solitary apartment, where he spends his evenings feeding his pet turtle, drinking strawberry milk, and solving Sudoku puzzles. The next day, Ji-woo is expelled from the dorms once again. As he leaves, Bo-ram teases him, expressing her disappointment that he did not live up to her expectations, though Ji-woo remains composed. He returns to his family apartment, where he tidies the space before his widowed mother comes home from work. She has worked tirelessly to raise him alone, and feels immense pride seeing him in such an important uniform. Ji-woo, unwilling to admit that he has nowhere to stay, tells her he is merely visiting and must return to the school before it gets too late. On his way back, rain begins to pour, and Ji-woo seeks refuge in the school's abandoned laboratory, only to be discovered by Hak-sung. Feeling sympathy for the boy, Hak-sung invites him to stay overnight in his office. While Ji-woo sleeps, Hak-sung notices the difficult math homework that Ji-woo had been unable to complete. At sunrise, Hak-sung sends him on his way. Ji-woo arrives in math class to discover that his homework has been completed flawlessly. Bo-ram notices this and urges Ji-woo to show the teacher, but he asks her to remain silent. After class, Ji-woo goes to thank Hak-sung and requests that he teach him the methods, but Hak-sung, true to his firm style, dismisses him once more. Later in the study room, Ji-woo observes that even his classmates' private tutors struggle with some of the homework problems, demonstrating just how exceptional Hak-sung's abilities are. Determined, Ji-woo begins following Hak-sung persistently, pleading for tutoring, but Hak-sung refuses to engage with him. One afternoon, while taking out the trash, Hak-sung overhears teachers discussing welfare students who have uncaring parents and low self-esteem, with Ji-woo specifically mentioned on the list. When Ji-woo approaches him again for tutoring, Hak-sung suggests that it might be better for him to transfer and warns that self-pity is not a merit to carry, as it only traps a person in their own sense of misfortune. Ji-woo argues that it frustrates him that others have opportunities that he cannot access. Moved by his sincerity, Hak-sung finally agrees to tutor him, requesting only that Ji-woo pay him with strawberry milk. The following day, Hak-sung visits his friend An Gi-chul, who had assisted him in defecting to South Korea and now works supporting North Korean defectors. They play board games, converse about life, and when Gi-chul gifts him lamps he needed, Hak-sung insists on paying for them, asserting that he did not come to the country to accept charity. That night, Hak-sung installs the lamps in the abandoned laboratory to conduct secret tutoring sessions with Ji-woo. 3 rules govern the lessons. First, absolute secrecy. Second, only mathematics-related questions are allowed. And third, Hak-sung will not discuss grades or test results. Ji-woo agrees to follow all 3 rules, after which Hak-sung gives him his first exercise, calculating the area of a triangle. Ji-woo solves it immediately, dismissing the problem as elementary. Hak-sung, however, challenges him by drawing a full circle around the triangle, indicating a different approach. Ji-woo feels tricked, thinking it unfair that the problem appears to have been altered. But Hak-sung explains that his approach is flawed. The lesson is not just about reaching the answer, it is about understanding the question itself. True mastery of math, he teaches, lies in the process of reasoning and problem solving, not simply obtaining the correct answer. When Ji-woo begins to grasp the concept, Hak-sung dubs it epsilon, a term that triggers a memory from his youth when he and a friend received an elegant pen as a reward for their academic achievements. Epsilon signifies something small, almost negligible, even trivial. Once the lesson ends, and since Ji-woo still lacks a place to stay, Hak-sung allows him to remain under his roof for the night. Ji-woo discovers that Hak-sung enjoys listening to classical music on an old cassette player, and they spend time discussing various classical composers. This serves as a diversion, allowing Hak-sung to avoid answering Ji-woo's probing questions about his past. The cassette is worn, producing poor audio quality, so Ji-woo plays the music on his phone instead. Hak-sung is fascinated by the clearer sound and, for the first time in years, sleeps soundly through the night. In fact, he remains in bed until late the following morning, by which point Ji-woo has already left for class. Mr. Kim announces significant news to his math students. Rather than a traditional final exam, they will compete in the prestigious Pythagoras math competition, which will serve as their evaluation. The students are not thrilled, as they have only 2 months to prepare, yet Mr. Kim expects nothing less than gold medals from all of them. Ji-woo continues to meet Hak-sung daily for secret tutoring sessions, and Bo-ram notices how frequently he buys strawberry milk, almost as if he is addicted. One evening, Ji-woo faces an exceptionally difficult problem and seeks guidance on the technique needed to solve it. Hak-sung tells him that he will need to work it out manually, without shortcuts. After 3 hours of concentrated effort, Ji-woo succeeds. In response, Hak-sung shares a fascinating fact. The renowned mathematician Bernhard Riemann computed 38 decimal places of the square root of 2 entirely by hand to develop a deep understanding of the problem-solving process, something impossible to achieve by merely memorizing formulas. This lesson profoundly enhances Ji-woo's comprehension of mathematics. Hak-sung refuses to confirm whether Ji-woo's solution is correct, emphasizing that discovering the answer independently is the role of a mathematician. Over the ensuing weeks, Ji-woo's abilities in math improve steadily and significantly. One afternoon, he receives distressing news. A close friend and fellow welfare student has decided to transfer back to his old school, admitting that attending this elite institution was not worth the effort. Ji-woo contemplates his own future, while Bo-ram tries to engage him in conversation. He feels that her comments about their shared circumstances are patronizing, given that she comes from wealth despite her mother being divorced. Their discussion is interrupted when Bo-ram's mother arrives to pick her up. In the car, Bo-ram is reprimanded for associating with a welfare student. Technically, Bo-ram is on welfare herself due to her family situation, though she does not receive financial aid, so her circumstances are not identical. Her mother also scolds her for listening to piano music, insisting she focus on academics, and arranges for Mr. Kim to become her private tutor, an action that is against regulations. That night, Ji-woo confides in Hak-sung about his friend's transfer and asks whether he should consider leaving as well. Hak-sung urges him to persevere, reminding him that true success relies less on innate intelligence and more on the courage to persist until the end. To illustrate this, he shows Ji-woo his corrected exercises. Although there are minor errors in the final answers, Ji-woo has successfully mastered the problem-solving process. That evening, Ji-woo's suspension ends, allowing him to return to the dorms, though he admits he misses sharing space with Hak-sung. The next day, Bo-ram presents him with strawberry milk accompanied by a note of apology. While Ji-woo is momentarily distracted, she follows him to the abandoned lab and uncovers his secret tutoring sessions. She thanks Hak-sung for looking after Ji-woo and asks if she can visit occasionally. Hak-sung agrees, stipulating that she must also maintain secrecy. Bo-ram jokingly calls him the commie officer, leaving Hak-sung confused. Though he is from North Korea, he never served in the military, having been exempted for reasons he chooses not to explain. At that moment, they notice a group of students sneaking around the campus. Having learned what occurred with Ji-woo previously, Hak-sung decides to take no action. On another evening, Ji-woo inquires why Hak-sung dedicated himself so intensely to math. Hak-sung explains that he initially studied it for scholarships and family obligations, but the more he delved into the subject, the more he appreciated its beauty, ultimately falling in love with it. He then invites Bo-ram to the piano to teach her a clever technique. Assigning each digit a note, they perform the number pi as a harmonious melody. During the following math class, Ji-woo applies Hak-sung's logic to correct Mr. Kim's solution to a problem he had previously overlooked. Mr. Kim rebukes him, explaining that while Ji-woo's answer may be correct, it does not match the examiner's intended solution, which is all that matters for the test. It is a matter of exam technique, yet Ji-woo insists on providing the correct answer, despite what is expected. Viewing this as insubordination, Mr. Kim makes him stand outside the classroom for the remainder of the session. Later, Ji-woo informs Mr. Kim that he will not be transferring schools. During another of Hak-sung's evening visits, Gi-chul presents him with a smartphone to make contacting him easier. Hak-sung proudly shows the document to Ji-woo later, and the boy can't help but notice he's reading long, dense theses on such a tiny screen. Wanting to help, Ji-woo arranges for a classmate to sneak him into the computer lab so he can print out the entire document and give it to Hak-sung as a proper gift. The following day brings the Pythagoras math competition. Thanks to Hak-sung's tutoring, Ji-woo performs exceptionally well. Bo-ram starts confidently, recalling the musical methods Hak-sung taught her, but soon frustration overtakes her. The pressure mounts, and she ends up leaving the classroom before finishing the exam. Her mother forces her to stay home to avoid embarrassment, fabricating a story about a family trip to cover for her absence. Ji-woo tries reaching out to her via messages, but all his attempts are ignored. That evening, Ji-woo and Hak-sung attend a classical concert for which Bo-ram secured free tickets. courtesy of her family's company sponsorship. Bo-ram never appears, but Hak-sung is so moved by the performance that tears well up in his eyes. After the concert, he invites Ji-woo back to his apartment for dinner, which marks the first time Ji-woo has ever seen Hak-sung eat a meal. That very night, the Pythagoras test is leaked online, causing an uproar among the teachers, who now must identify the culprit to avoid being reprimanded by the education board. Meanwhile, Ji-woo and Hak-sung visit a bookstore. There, a stranger recognizes Hak-sung, also a North Korean defector. The man addresses Hak-sung as doctor, recalling his days teaching at a university in the North. He even refers to him as the famous mathematical genius and mistakenly assumes Ji-woo is his son, creating an awkward moment. Hak-sung thanks the man for the memory and swiftly leaves the store, refusing to answer Ji-woo's questions. Back at home, Hak-sung reflects on fond memories with his late son, Lee Tae-yeon, sharing dinners, caring for their turtle, and buying strawberry milk because it was Tae-yeon's favorite treat. The next day, news breaks on television. The Riemann hypothesis, one of the most significant unsolved problems in mathematics, is reportedly being solved by a famous North Korean mathematician named Lee Hak-sung, though it is still undergoing review by a board of scholars. Professor Oh recounts how he once competed in a math Olympiad against Hak-sung as a child, with Hak-sung representing North Korea and Oh representing South Korea. Both were awarded a prestigious pen by a celebrated mathematician, and Oh still treasures it. Gi-cheol and Ji-woo both see the news, and Ji-woo immediately seeks out Hak-sung to ask about it. Hak-sung reacts with anger, warning Ji-woo never to speak of the Riemann hypothesis again. Meanwhile, Mr. Kim struggles with the fallout from the leaked test. After reviewing security footage, a co-worker discovers crucial evidence. The following day, Mr. Kim summons Ji-woo and shows him the recording of him sneaking out of the computer lab holding printed sheets. Ji-woo tries to explain that it is unrelated but has no proof. Given the video evidence and the miraculous improvement in his math skills over the past few months, no one will believe him. Mr. Kim offers a deal. If Ji-woo agrees to transfer, he will not make the blame public. Unfortunately, rumors of Ji-woo leaking the test spread anyway, frustrating Bo-ram, who knows the truth. Gi-cheol faces his own challenges. North Korea is upset that South Korea is claiming Hak-sung's achievements, especially since the work relates to military encryption. The NIAS pressures Gi-cheol to persuade Hak-sung to appear on television to clarify the situation. Hak-sung's name dominates the news, and an old colleague even visits, urging him to return to the North. However, the colleague admits his request is partly motivated by personal gain, and bringing up what happened to Hak-sung's son only angers him further. Gi-cheol later visits Hak-sung to apologize for failing to keep the NIS at bay, though Hak-sung remains grateful for his years of protection. While packing to leave the city, Hak-sung receives the research document Gi-cheol had rescued, a work Hak-sung had once tried to discard but was too valuable to destroy. Ji-woo arrives at the same time, but he waits outside upon hearing shouting. Hak-sung is furious, knowing that this research indirectly led to his son's death, and he refuses to allow it to be aired on television. Once Gi-cheol departs, Ji-woo attempts to speak with Hak-sung, but the older man lashes out, insisting they are nothing more than tutor and student, and refusing to acknowledge any closer connection. Later, Ji-woo receives a frustrated call from Bo-ram, who cannot comprehend why he allows himself to be framed like this. He simply tells her it's finished and ends the call. Meanwhile, Hak-sung reaches the bus station, and a fleeting glimpse of a stranger reminds him eerily of his son's face. Memories of the night Tae-yeon died flood back. After defending fellow defectors in another confrontation, Tae-yeon had argued with his father, accusing him of selfishness for escaping to the south instead of staying to care for his sick mother with tuberculosis. Hak-sung insisted his actions were to give Tae-yeon a better life, but his son pointed out that doing menial jobs and being treated like dirt was far from a scholar's dream. After wishing his father a life consumed only by mathematics, Tae-yeon ran toward the north, attempting to swim back, but he was shot by border guards on sight. Back at home, Ji-woo sneaks in while Bo-ram's mother sleeps to use her stamp on the transfer papers. The next morning, he submits them to Mr. Kim, who assures him he did the right thing. Hak-sung, hiding in a hotel to avoid being taken to the TV studio, is surprised to get a call from Bo-ram, informing him of Ji-woo's transfer. That afternoon marks the Pythagoras award ceremony. Ji-woo is heading out when Bo-ram suddenly appears, grabbing him and whisking him to the auditorium while snatching his belongings. Professor Oh begins the ceremony with a speech on the recently proven theory, and in that moment, Hak-sung decides to make his move. Having released his turtle into the river earlier, he rushes to the school and interrupts the event. Presenting his pen as identification, Professor Oh welcomes him warmly, allowing him to speak. Hak-sung opens with a lighthearted remark about his work as a guard, then confesses he was the one who taught Ji-woo math and presents the printed thesis as evidence that he did not leak the test. He also exposes Mr. Kim as the real culprit behind the leak to his private students, causing the teacher to leave in both anger and shame. Hak-sung goes on to share his story. He defected from North Korea to pursue mathematics freely because his government was using his research for weaponry. His desire was to help students secure opportunities and gain admission to prestigious colleges, yet that ambition inadvertently cost his son's life. Filled with regret, he confesses his shame. Yet Ji-woo remains steadfast and loyal, guarding the secret even at the risk of his own future. Overcome with emotion, Hak-sung apologizes and thanks Ji-woo for believing in him. Gi-cheol, who has been listening quietly, departs without pressing about the TV appearance. However, he waits outside to offer Hak-sung a ride. After discarding the smartphone he had gifted Hak-sung, Gi-cheol presents a surprise: a new, fully legal South Korean passport and tickets to leave town, ensuring Hak-sung can evade the NIS for a while. Gi-cheol admits he may face dismissal for this, but considers it worthwhile. Sometime later, Gi-cheol visits Ji-woo to deliver Hak-sung's parting gifts: the famous pen and the first draft of his thesis. 3 years pass and Ji-woo, now in college, joins his classmates on a visit to the prestigious Oberwolfach Research Institute for Mathematics. Hak-sung is employed there, and Ji-woo surprises him with a bottle of strawberry milk and a warm hug before launching into an extensive discussion about mathematics. Like and subscribe for more recaps like this.